Okay, I think it's 4:31. It's probably a good time to start kicking off into this session. So, hi everybody. My name's Phil Clapham. I'm the mentor to the trainees at Nallawilli Technology. Today, I'm lucky enough to be your MC for this gathering. Now, we've got a jam-packed call today with two main presenters, but before I do anything else, I'd like to recognize, respect, and acknowledge our First Nations peoples and all traditional ancestral bloodline original owners and their descendants throughout Australia. This includes the people of the Eora Nation in which I sit today, and we pay our deepest respects to elders past, present, and those of the future, for they have held and still hold their spiritual traditional belonging, lore, languages, ceremonies, memories, and hopes while maintaining continuity with their country. Some quick housekeeping. This session is being recorded so that it can be distributed later. I think actually it won't be out tomorrow, probably be early next week. And for the people that have missed it or want to revisit, not a problem. In your WebEx window to the right on your computer, you'll see a chat and a Q&A pane. If you've got some questions, pop them into the Q&A pane and it'll be moderated. And there's a Q&A session at the end where we'll get a chance to ask Glenn some questions. All questions will get answered, by the way. Some of them, the more topical ones, we'll see if we can ask them in the session if we've got time. But if not, then they will be answered by email or some other mechanism by which we get everything answered. I'll be on the Q&A back channel, so I'll help moderate all those questions. And we do find it much more engaging to present to an audience that has their video turned on. But please do remember to keep your Microsoft muted until we get to the Q&A session in the end, and you may want to ask a question at that point. Now, we do have Ron Murray, who was one of the First Nation trainees at Nallawilli on the call as well. So if you do have questions for him around how he landed a job in technology, which might be of interest to you, then please post that into the Q&A as well. We've got two main presenters today. Glenn Makowski is the CEO of CommuniCloud, who's going to provide us insights on how we should think like a hacker to increase our security awareness. And this is particularly topical as many of us are under lockdown at the moment or are spending a lot, or perhaps even too much time just being online, statically online. Now, Scott Allen is the CEO of the Nallawilli Group. I'll ask him to step up. Just Scott, if you wouldn't mind coming off mute and just give us a bit of background about the Nallawilli Group and the relationship we have with CommuniCloud.
Hey everybody, how's it going? My name is Scott Allen and I come from the Wabuku Nations, which is just outside of Newcastle. And today I am coming to you from the Camaragal country, which is just in the Northern Beaches. The word Nallawilli comes from the Darug Nation and it means to sit down and talk to one another. And it's been around, the first custodian of the name Nallawilli was a lady by the name of Pauline McLeod. And she passed away in 2003, and her older brother, Roderick, went to the elders of the Darug Nation and asked them if he could use the name Nallawilli in support of Pauline's legacy. So in 2009, Nallawilli was created, and since then we've been growing as an organisation. We started off our roots in pens and paper, so A4 reams of paper and pens, and since then we have grown and expanded to what we now call the Nallawilli Group. Today we have an affordable housing, an ICT business. We have a joint venture with a company called Wink through Mandora, and we also have Nallawilli Technology. And what we've found over the years is that if somebody came to me and said, Scott, what is Nallawilli? You know, in less than 30 seconds, and my answer to them is that Nallawilli is an onboarding platform for First Nation kids into vocations that they typically don't get access to. So what we've done is we've built a business through partnerships with very much so socially minded organisations like CommuniCloud to help us actually build capability. So when you look at the kids that are coming through today, First Nation, we have about a 2% representation in university. So 98% of the kids today come from what I call the other side of the tracks. So they have amazing attitudes, great aptitude, and what they're really looking for is just that opportunity. So the Nallawilli Group is really about creating those sustainable and future-proofed opportunities for First Nation people like Ron and Chandra into these vocations. And for us, cyber is a very much so a key capability for us. Not that I should probably tell you this, but it is actually very close to our heart, because not only a week and a half ago, our founder, love him dearly, Roderick, got caught in a scam, and he lost quite a bit of money to this, and Phil can attest to this. It's been quite a challenge to take Roderick from pre-being hacked to where he is today and getting him back up and running, because he's actually stuck in country at the moment. So cyber for us and our relationship with CommuniCloud is key for us, not only in teaching and educating the future generation, but also getting them to go back into community and educate and learn and help our elders learn about the requirements of cyber. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for your time today, and hand over back to Phil. Thank you very
Scott.
much.
That was awesome. I see Ron's joined. If you've got your video on, Ron, and give us a wave, you may get a question or two, and that would be excellent if you did. So let's jump ahead, and I'll introduce Glenn from CommuniCloud. Take it away, Glenn. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Phil. So we'll start off with a disclaimer that says basically I can't be sued for anything that I'm about to say. It's a little bit of a joke, really, but the reality is, you know, a lot of the things I'm about to talk about today are through experience, through learning, and through interaction with our customers. So you should always research what someone tells you, especially around cybersecurity, because that in itself can be a potential risk. So that's why we have the disclaimer up there. Okay, so before I talk about the agenda, I'm just going to say 3 things that I want everybody to take away from today. First one is think like a hacker. So what does that actually mean? That doesn't mean you have to sort of, you know, sit there and pretend that you've got a hoodie on and all those kinds of crazy imagery and all that kind of stuff. What it means is think about, if you make things easy, how easy am I making it for both myself, but unfortunately the person who wants to do me harm? So if I make all my passwords with a 1, 2, 3 at the end, or when I update them, I use the next number in the series, that's making it very easy for the hacker. So when I'm doing my security stuff and I'm looking at, you know, what options I have, always think, you know, that old adage that says, you know, you've got one house here and you've got another house here. One house has the alarm very prominent on the front, the other one doesn't. If I'm a criminal, which one do I go after? Okay, so that's what it means when we say think like a hacker. The second thing is you've really got to think about this thing, and that is nothing is actually free. What does that mean? It means that if I'm getting a free application, for example, or I'm getting some sort of free piece of software, the chances are that it's paid for in a number of ways. One of those ways might be legitimate, where they sell the data that you're using in the application to marketing firms, or there could be some other dark reason for why that software is free. Hackers do like to embed technology, malware inside legitimate programs, so that when you go and get your free software to, let's say, compress a file or zip something, unfortunately it's got an extra bit of payload in there that's going to be not good for your PC. The third thing is hackers rely on you being in a rush or not taking your time. Okay, that's one of the big things about cybersecurity, is that the end user, yourselves, you have a big responsibility to protect yourself and also your organization. Now, if you're in a rush or you're doing multiple things at the same time, it can be very easy to press on the wrong link or download the wrong thing from a website, or just not be as alert as you should be. So those three things, again, think like a hacker. Nothing is free, and take your time. So we're going to go through a few definitions before we begin, so you probably know what I'm talking about. I'm going to tell you a little bit about why I'm here and why I'm speaking to you. There's a nice video we're going to play you guys about what actually is possible in terms of hacking. Quite scary, but also enlightening. We're going to talk about the threat landscape and the kind of losses that we're seeing in the industry at the moment, both in Australia and on a global level. We're going to talk about some of the threats. We're going to talk about specifically phishing, and that's again back to a large percentage of breaches or issues arise from the individual, the user. And phishing is one of those things that gets you to do something that you might not necessarily do. It tricks you, and then you open up your system to issues. And what you can do to protect yourself. So the good thing about that is it doesn't cost you heaps of money all the time. If you take a little bit of time, then you can probably protect yourself most of the time. However, if you're in a bit of a rush, then you're exposing yourself. So on to definitions. Phishing, an attack in which the target is contacted by email or text message by someone posing as a legitimate institution to lure individuals into providing personal information, sensitive information, or passwords. For your benefit, the target is actually the user. Human error, an unintended action by individuals directly resulting in a data breach, sending a document containing personal information. That happened quite recently, where one of the government officials decided not to use the blind copy on email and decided to send everybody's email addresses out on a government dispatch. So again, even the people at the very top can have problems when it comes to human error. Social engineering impersonation, an attack that relies heavily on human interaction to manipulate people into breaking normal security procedures and best practice in order to gain access to systems, networks, or physical locations. So in the old days, that would probably just be called a scam, but now it's called social engineering. And impersonation is a big problem out there, which we'll talk about later. Malware is just software which is specifically designed to disrupt, damage, or gain unauthorized access to a computer system. So it's basically a software application that you don't know that you're running on your machine. So why am I here? Okay, well, look, you know, we talk to probably 30 or 40 different customers a week in our organization. And out of all of those, I would say probably half are sitting there thinking it's not going to happen to them. The statistics say otherwise. It definitely will happen. It's not a question of whether it will happen. It's a question of when it will happen. The threat hasn't even started yet. So we're not really seeing the sophisticated attacks that some of the bigger organisations are seeing at the moment, right? We still get the text message from Australia Post where you click on the link and, you know, that causes enough damage as it is. But there are some very, very sophisticated attacks which haven't even started yet. We're seeing, you know, a lot of people have this perception, unfortunately, but again, it's a good marketing slide, of people in hoodies, right? People sitting on an office with a keyboard or whatever. But the reality is these criminals are very sophisticated. They actually sell some of their malware as a legitimate application that you can go and buy and then use to hack or breach an enterprise. But the really scary thing is, and looking at that slide, they actually have call centers. You can ring up if you're having trouble breaching an organization using an application that you've purchased from one of these professional hacking organizations and ask them to help you get through that company's defenses. So it's really, really scary. This is going on all the time. AI and machine learning, it started. So you might think, how does that work? Well, we use a lot of machine learning and artificial intelligence in our defense. However, the hackers are using it in attacks. We we were at a cybersecurity conference quite recently, and virtually, I should say, obviously because of COVID, but and there was a demonstration we saw where a piece of malware had infiltrated an organization's Exchange server, email server. And what it did is it took all the emails from individuals, and it learnt how those individuals talked or phrased their sentences. And then what it did is it injected text into a messaging platform and basically enticed that person to share information and eventually click on a file. So there's an example of where the individual that was being targeted couldn't even tell that the attacker was a machine. Very scary. You know, it's not just about technology as well. There's a lot of social engineering going on. So for example, you might have someone ring you and say they're from Microsoft. There was a scam going around the UK at one stage where people were ringing up and saying, hey, I'm ringing on behalf of Microsoft. I understand that your PC is running slow. Now, we all know Microsoft. We all love Microsoft, I'm sure. But the reality is, you know, guess what? People's computers do run slow. So there's a chance that you might say yes. And then eventually they get to access your machine and then also infiltrate your machine by having remote access, eventually getting you to pay money to unlock that machine. So that's just a case of social engineering where you've had a phone call. So why do you think the government is taking this threat seriously? Well, we're going to show you guys a video, and in that video, you're going to actually see the full extent to which some of these cybersecurity criminals can actually infiltrate you and some of your systems.
Hackers are everywhere. From Ashley Madison to JP Morgan, from Jennifer Lawrence to the federal government, our biggest celebrities, corporations, and institutions have all been the targets of devastating cyber attacks. I wanted to see how bad a hack can get, so I invited a few of the world's best hackers to try to hack me and show me where my vulnerabilities are. And now I'm going to meet them in Las Vegas at Defcon, the biggest hacker convention of the year, and see what they found. This might not have been the best idea. Defcon is the biggest hacker convention of the year. It's a place where thousands of hackers come to hear talks, to demonstrate their newest hacks. It's actually a place that's so dangerous to be on the internet that they tell you to turn off the Wi-Fi and the Bluetooth on your phone, and they tell you not to use the ATMs too, because those could be hacked as well. This is the Defcon ballroom. This is sort of the main room where things are happening, and it's pretty wild. I think this is car hacking village. This car is locked. Can you get me in?
I'll unlock it for you. Should be good.
Hacking is no longer like this fringe activity, and if you are at Defcon, there's a good chance that you're here because you want to learn what could happen to you or your company.
Anyone here first time in the SCCTF? Holy crap.
I invited Chris to hack me with his team, but they're going to hack me using social engineering, which is essentially hacking without any code. They just use a phone and an internet connection.
We help people with human security issues by testing vulnerabilities for like a network test, but it's for the people network. We test those vulnerabilities, see where the holes are, and then help people learn so they can patch them.
Can we try some of this? Can we try some, see if it works?
Yeah, we probably could have our star Visher here make some phone calls as
Let's do it.
Sure. Do you want to do a sample phishing call?
What's phishing?
Phishing is voice elicitation, and basically what you do is you use the phone to extract information or data points that can be used in a later attack.
Let's do it. Who are you going to call?
Maybe I'll call your cell phone provider and see if I can get them to give me your email address.
I bet they're good. I bet they have my back. But yeah, go for it.
I'm going to spoof from your number, so it's going to look like it's calling from you.
Okay.
Hi, I'm so sorry. Can you hear me okay? My baby, I'm sorry. My husband's like, we're about to apply for a loan and we just had a baby and he's like, get this done by today. So I'm so sorry, I can't call you back. I'm trying to log into our account for uses information and I can't remember what email address we used to log the account. The baby's crying and can you help me? Awesome.
In just 30 seconds,
@gmail.com?
Jessica gets my personal email address.
Now, if I needed to add our older daughter on our account so she could call in and make changes, how would I need to go about doing that? You would have to send me a secure PIN through a text message? Yeah, well, the thing is, I don't think I'll be able to receive a text message if I'm on the phone. Shh. Oh, I'm not on there either? So I thought when we got married, he added me to the account. Okay, my
Jessica uses my girlfriend's name and a fake social security number
5127
to set up her own personal access to my account.
Wait, I'm sorry, so there's no password on my account right now? Can I set that up?
She even gets the support person to change my password.
Thank you so much for your help today.
So she just basically blocked me out of my own account.
I'll get her fed after this. All right, thank you.
Holy shit. So they just gave you access to my entire cell phone account.
You're gonna have to go on and change your password now because it's Jess, my name.
And all it took was a crying baby and a phone call.
Yes.
I really thought that my cell phone company would protect me. I mean, like, this is the most basic stuff, and they're not doing it. And if they're not doing it, you know all these other businesses aren't doing it either. Anyone with a phone and an internet connection can do social engineering. But I was curious, what can a hacker with serious coding skills do?
Well, Defcon is the world's biggest hacking convention. It's hacking everything, hacking social, hacking hardware, hacking software, hacking various systems.
I asked Dan Tentler, a well-known security researcher, to turn all of his firepower on me.
I did get into quite a number of things that I found.
So what were the first things you did? How did you start hacking me?
I quickly found your Squarespace blog and had an idea. Basically what I did was created a bogus Squarespace site and sent an email to you, a phish asking you to go to this website, run this certificate installer.
And I did it, because I'm an idiot.
So once you ran that, it gave me access to your computer, and I created several fake pop-ups that looked like system pop-ups that would ask you for your credentials.
You didn't even have to have my passwords.
No, you gave them to me.
I gave them to you.
Yeah. So I stole your 1Password keychain.
And 1Password is where I store all my other passwords. So effectively by...
And your social security number and your Amex stuff and all your stock trading and bank information. I can send email to everyone in this room as you. I am you right now, if I wanted to be. If my evilness is working correctly, it should actually be taking pictures of your desktop and pictures through your webcam every 2 minutes. And I have been watching you for about 2 days now. In coffee shops, at your mom's house, on a plane. Here's your editing stuff, there's you like.
Oh my God, so
nervous.
this is literally
every 2 minutes.
Through my webcam.
Yeah, through this guy.
How badly could you have messed up my life?
I could have made you homeless. I could have made you homeless and penniless.
How?
Like,
how would you make me homeless?
Like, I have control of your digital life in its entirety. I have all your credentials, I have all your access to all your financial information, all your work information, all your personal information. I can pay people with your bank account or your Amex account. I am you. I can fully impersonate. Like, the only thing I couldn't doctor would be like your fingerprints.
This is like as bad as it gets.
It's ridiculous, yeah, it's bad.
So it turns out that Dan Tentler is very good at his job. I mean, he hacked the hell out of me. He got everything. I mean, frankly, I want to take my computer and throw it into the deepest part of the ocean, and I want to become a hermit, and I want to never touch a piece of technology again, because holy shit, that was everything. That was the keys to my entire life, and he just pulled them out of his pocket.
Okay, everyone. So, obviously you can see that it's quite a scary potential there if you're not vigilant, right? We were talking about phishing earlier. Obviously that whole attack was initiated by a user and an individual clicking on a link, right? So I think we're all getting a little bit better at that. But just remember, if you're doing 3 or 4 things at the same time and an email comes in and you're just not paying attention, that kind of thing can happen. So look, why is the increase in hacking going on? Why are the hackers so interested, and why are the hacks becoming more prevalent? Well, look, the landscape says that the number of internet users has increased exponentially over the last few years, right? From 415 million to 3.9 billion internet users. Ransomware has gone from 325 million a year in 2015 to 11.5 billion in 2019. Well, I can tell you now that number's a lot higher. And the reason I know that is because one of our customers got ransomed for almost 2 billion euros. Now, we weren't looking after the cybersecurity element of that customer. We were doing the collaboration side of things, but we had to help them out there. And in the end, they were able to sort that out, but they were very lucky. If it had been some other breach, they might have been a little bit more trouble, but 2 billion euros is quite a lot of money. IoT devices. So they're things that we probably take for granted, like you might have a webcam at home that's used for security. You might have one of those light bulbs that say Philips produced that you can change the colors with. That's an IoT device, but that is actually an access point into your network and potentially your information. The number of those devices has just increased in a crazy amount over the last few years, and is also, you know, going on even more and more as we speak. A lot of those devices have no security built into them, so things like temperature sensors, air conditioning, a lot of the manufacturers are starting to put that in now, but it is definitely a place where you can breach a network. And the cybercrime, you know, all the days of, you know, these criminals doing extortion where they physically go to someone and they threaten them, they're not doing that anymore. They've actually moved into cybercrime because they can make a lot more money. Just a little bit more on stats, you know, 81% of breaches are due to weak passwords. You know, don't use the same password for work and home. You know, don't use simple passwords. There was a table produced recently that actually showed how quickly a password could be breached based on the number of characters used. And it was really quick, on even up to 8 characters. That's why we recommend using some sort of password control application rather than having to try and remember them all yourselves. More than 99% of cyber attacks rely on a human interaction. Nearly 1 in 4 phishing emails were associated with a Microsoft product. Now, we're not saying Microsoft is a problem. What we're saying is don't take Microsoft as being the looking after your security unless you've actually paid for some additional licensing, okay? Don't just assume because it's Microsoft it's going to be safe, all right? 35% of phishing attacks happen between 9 a.m. and 12 p.m., okay? And that's because you're probably around to do something. They need you to interact with whatever they are trying to do. 61% of Australian organisations have experienced a data breach in the last 2 years. Every 8 minutes, a cybercrime is reported in Australia. Now that's fresh off the press, that statistic. That only came out the other day. In the last financial year, cybercrime has increased by 13%. Now, as Phil said at the very beginning of the call, there's a lot of people working from home, and that's created a very big risk for most users, right? So it's increased the attack surface, as they say in the cybersecurity industry. This is just a little bit about the kind of losses that we're seeing in the market. You know, even the Secret Service and the government in the US is experiencing breaches. I mean, these are probably state actors in most cases. However, there are individuals that are trying to get that sensitive information. Hong Kong Stock Exchange, they've been attacked. As I mentioned before, in terms of data breaches, there was the Australian attorney who emailed out everybody's email address. Now, you might think the email address by itself is not a problem, but cybersecurity analysts know that what the criminals are doing is they're building up a portfolio of information on you. So they'll get your date of birth from one place, your email address from another, and they'll start to build up a picture of how you interact with your computer, and they'll use this to breach you. They'll look for trends. I'll just skip ahead there. Authorities believe that cybercrime has cost Australian business $33 billion over the past year. Now, again, I'm assuming a lot of that is related to the fact that people are working from home. You know, you've got to look who's looking over your shoulder. Don't leave your computer unlocked, all those kinds of good things, because you could have friends coming in who think it's funny to plug in a USB stick and download something onto your computer. That might not actually cause a problem, but what else is on the USB stick? This is just a bit of a chart showing you how much the human intervention is causing the problem. A lot of people, when they think about hacking, are thinking about really sophisticated applications or tools, but the reality is phishing, clicking on something, or actually losing your credentials. So for example, You know, they find your username and password. It's used on a number of systems, and guess what? Maybe it's actually the same as your work account, and they're able to get into where you work or where you study. You know, at the university, you've all got credentials. You know, with the best intentions, there could be the ability for someone to traverse the network and access things that maybe they shouldn't be using your credentials. Now, this is a really important thing to remember, and that is that your mobile phone, these little things here, you know, these are becoming a more and more of a problem. The increase over the last, you know, few years has been dramatic, and that's because people don't think about their mobile phones as an actual potential issue. But we're seeing more and more of it as time goes on. Phishing attacks on mobile devices have grown by 85% year on year. So please, you know, look at what you've got on there as defenses. Make sure you've got your PIN codes. Make sure the phone locks when you're not using it, because it's definitely a way into your network or to, you know, your home environment. You know, people can put things on the phones that basically breach your network once you're at home. So, you know, look after your mobile phone. Now, again, back to the whole thing about time. You know, if you're in a rush, you know, you might not look at the URL of a website and see the little padlock in the top left-hand corner. By the way, that little padlock in the top left-hand corner tells you that that website is secure and that your information you're exchanging is between you and that website. Okay, so it's encrypted. All right, but if you don't look at that domain and you don't check, for example, a lot of the criminals just misspell the domain by one letter, or they might put in an extra number or something like that. And you just really need to take notice of what that is, because they will mimic and make it all look and feel the same as the actual person that you're trying to talk to's website. For example, Apple in this case. So just a little bit of information on what you can do to protect yourself that won't cost you a ton of money. Use a password application. So as I said at the very beginning, I don't know pretty much any of my passwords anymore, right? I've got one password that is extraordinarily complex. However, every time I visit a website or an application, my password manager fills in that password for me. Don't use the same passwords at work, university, and home, okay? Because again, hackers love that. They love it when they compromise an organization due to someone using a password or username the same as at the home. Change your default passwords. You know, routers and switches, you know, they come out with standard passwords, right? So if your home broadband, the lists of those standard default passwords are actually available on the internet. So a hacker can tell from the outside of your home what device is at the end of the internet connection, what brand of router, all that kind of stuff, and they can look up the password. And next minute they're in, and if you're doing your banking, for example, you could be exposing yourself. Use
I just want to interject for a second, because we do have a question, and it's quite a topical question because you're talking about passwords. So rather than wait for the Q&A, I'm just going to ask it now. It's from Adam, right? If you use a password app, are you more vulnerable, like in the video, as the hacker only has to get one password to have a whole lot of access?
Okay, that's a really good question. Thanks, Phil. Well, look, at the end of the day, it depends on how complex you make your password for the password vault. One thing I would say is that the people that produce the password applications, and you should do your research on which one you intend to use, that is their life in terms of how they make their money, right? So they're specialists in protecting your passwords, okay? So to answer the question, if you make your password simple for your password vault, then yes, you're absolutely right. You are making yourself more vulnerable. However, as I said, with my password for my password vault, there's no way anybody could guess it. I would be pretty confident to say, because it is very, very complex and long. So when you're choosing your password for the vault, make sure you go and look at what the recommended rules are for choosing the password for that vault. Because unless you do that, yes, you are exposing yourself.
And multi-factor authentication against your password vault, Glenn, what's your thoughts on that?
The more layers of security that you can put in place to protect yourself, the better. is mine. So it's interesting you asked that, because I remember when I first started this journey 3 years ago, I was the same as most people. I get annoyed by having to put an multi-factor authentication in, or having an extra step in the security. But having seen what can happen, don't mind now. Sometimes there's 3 or 4 layers of security in some of the things I use, and to be honest with you, I'm quite happy that they're there.
That's awesome, Glenn. Anyway, if anyone else has got any questions around this, please post them in. That was a super duper question to ask at just the right moment in time. Thanks, Glenn.
No worries. Yeah, so put protection on your mobile. As I was saying before, you can download Norton. That'll give you a license that allows you to put it on your mobile phone. Home technology. As I said at the very beginning, be aware of free software. We went to a conference a few years back now, and one of the demonstrations was an expert showing us how to embed malware into some of this free technology that's available. So, for example, the lady said to us, "Oh, tell us one of the free applications you use." And it was, I think I used Putty or something like this, and that's used to, look at, SSH into a device or something like that. But basically, what she did as part of the demonstration was upload Putty onto her computer. She embedded malware into that, put it onto a website, and then allowed people to download it for free. Now, when you looked at the applications side by side, you could tell that one was slightly bigger than the other. The other thing to look for is something called the hash value. Now, most websites now will give you a hash value for an application. You need to compare that hash value from the manufacturer and the one that you've downloaded to be able to tell whether it's legit or not. So if you have to use free software, make sure you check the hash value of that software. You can Google that and find out what hash value means. I won't go into that now, but it's pretty much the only way you can tell whether an application is legitimate or not. Protect your personal information. So, when you go shopping, just because the person behind the counter says, "Give me your phone number," doesn't mean they need your phone number. Just because the person behind the counter says they want your email address, they don't probably need your email address. They've just been asked to collect that on behalf of the shop in order to be able to market to you. But again, what safety protection do they have around your information? So that store might have that information, stored somewhere, and that gets breached. Then that's available to cyber criminals. One of the other things I wanted to talk to you today about is these things, these cables that you can get from the internet, right? Or you get when you go to the airport. There was another demonstration there where this, for example, can have a small chip inserted into it. Now, effectively what that means is as soon as you plug that into your computer, that person who's put that chip inside this, now this might happen on an individual basis, but there have been examples where supply chains, in other words, the manufacturer has been compromised and the chip has been inserted from standard. So you go and buy it out of a blister packet, it's, let's say for no particular brand, you plug it into your computer and they've got control. And during the demonstration we saw, they were able to do quite a lot of things based on the fact that they were plugged into your computer. So they had physical access to your computer. So be very wary of things like those charges at the airport, where it just says plug in. You don't know what is going on with those cables. When you're doing things like in that video, putting passwords into your keyboard and all that kind of good stuff, cover your webcam. Use a physical cover, or you can buy those little slidey things that you can put over the camera. They're a good idea. Destroy information securely. Don't be throwing credit cards and things like that in the bin and not chopping them up. If you've got to dispose of a computer, make sure the hard drive is copied over correctly and use some sort of software application, or stick a drill bit through it if it's not worth anything. There's no way they can get information off that hard drive then. Updates. So look, this is pretty much one of the last things I'm going to talk to you guys about. Updates are necessary. I know they're a pain, right? But most updates contain security updates. And these things are known to the cyber criminals, okay? There's whole websites out there that they can go to which scan the internet and tell them where there's unpatched devices. When I say unpatched, I mean they're not being updated to the latest software. Okay, so we recently did some work with a company and they hadn't patched their Exchange server. Now, this brings me to, what are these guys after? Most people think, oh, they're trying to hack my bank account and all this kind of stuff. They're actually not always doing that. They are trying to get money, but there's lots of ways to get money. So, for example, ransomware, they encrypt your hard drive. Impersonation. Now, this is unfortunately one of the things that was happening to one of our customers when we were doing some penetration testing on their behalf. Their Exchange server was unpatched. And what was happening is the cyber criminals were sending emails, unsolicited emails from their Exchange server, which was damaging their brand. Okay, now brand damage is out there. Cyber criminals are making a lot of money out of hurting competitors on behalf of other companies. So, it's not just about extorting money. It can be about things like your brand. It's your personal brand as well. You can imagine if someone compromises your email and starts telling all your friends that you're doing things that you're not doing. That can also damage your personal brand. And then that can actually cause problems for years to come. There's been lots of stories where people have done silly things on social media and it's been presented to them in an interview. Now, it may have been legit or it may have been someone planting that. So you've got to be really careful about your personal brand. So 10 things to look for with a phishing, right? So as I said, the most important thing is time. Don't rush. If you send an email and it wants you to do something, but it wants you to do it urgently, then the chances are it's probably a phishing email, okay? Spelling errors, it's a key one as well. Read the sentences in the email. Does it make sense? Does it stick out as not being grammatically correct? Check the email signatures. Be careful of attachments. Now, a lot of defenses these days will remove attachments, but again, the cyber criminals are becoming cleverer about how to get those through. Most importantly, when you're in doubt, use details that you've previously gathered for someone rather than the information provided in the email. As I said, these criminals have contact centers. So if there's an email and it's got a phone number and it says ring this if you're not sure, chances are you'll be talking to a cyber criminals contact center rather than the contact center of the organization that's they're pretending to be. And lastly, other than the fact that I really like the pictures on this slide, it's actually a big message in there for you guys, right? And that is attackers are becoming more of a chameleon. What I mean by that is they're becoming more clever. They're less brutish, okay? They're less obvious. So be vigilant, take your time. And then just to summarize those 3 things I said at the very beginning, think like a hacker. Make sure you've got your own defenses. Nothing is free. If someone's giving you something for free, evaluate why that is. And then the last thing, just to close, take your time. Thanks. Over to you, Phil.
Yep. Okay, I've got another question, Glenn. And this is from Rebecca. And I presume this question is more geared towards apps on mobile devices, but it could be PC as well. If you've allowed an app to have permissions, can you undo this, or will deleting the app remove that permission?
So my recommendation in that scenario would be to remove the permissions. So yes, you can remove the permissions depending on the device. I've got an Android, but I know that I've also got an iPad as well. And with PCs, you can definitely remove the permissions. So to answer your question, if it was me, I would remove the permissions and then I would delete the app.
And of course, the first thing is to follow the 10 rules that Glenn has put down and take your time and assess whether the app is legitimate first. Because if it's not legitimate and it's on your phone, then it doesn't matter. I would imagine moving permission won't make any difference. You're pretty much going to have to factory reset. Is that about right, Glenn?
Yes, yep, depending on the app. I mean, we do a lot of research with like-minded companies who have lots of information about certain apps. It depends on the aggressiveness of the app, to be honest with you, Rebecca. But the reality is do some research on the internet and then decide on, how severe it is. To Phil's point, if it's got a really bad reputation, reset the actual phone or the computer.
Yeah, always follow the old rule. If it sounds too good to be true and it looks too good to be true, then it's probably too good to be true. Lee, do you have any questions? You want to come off mute and maybe ask a question?
I do, thanks, Phil. Yeah, I've got a couple of others here that have come in. So Sarah has a question. Glenn, what is your opinion on the usage of USB sticks at school/work, uni, etc.?
Okay, yeah, cool. That's a good question. So generally, I don't like USB sticks. However, I know they're convenient. So what I would suggest is it's based on the policy of the organization you wish to use that USB stick at. So for example, the university might have a policy that you can't use them. The place that you're working might have a policy that you can't use them. But if they are allowable, there's a couple of things that I would suggest. One, that you use encryption. So for example, if you were to lose that USB device, then at least it's encrypted and has some defenses. A lot of USBs allow you to have a password. So again, I would suggest having a password on that device. And then thirdly, don't put anything that you wouldn't want to lose on that USB device because they're getting smaller and they're easier to lose.
Okay, Glenn, I've got another question that's come in from Jess. How would I know if a protective software is reputable? I'm presuming that's some sort of virus scanner or defender software. And how much should I spend on protection?
Okay, that's a really good question. So the reality is we have this conversation with our customers all the time. So it depends on what you're trying to protect, okay? So if, for example, your computer has a lot of information on it that you wouldn't want to lose, then you have to work out what the risk is of losing that and then what it's worth to protect it. So if you're just a home user or a school or something like that, then it depends on your disaster recovery. So what I mean by that is, have you got it backed up? Okay, but if it's about how much should I spend on protecting it from being lost, it really depends on what it is that you have on your computer. So if you have a lot of personal information such as banking and all that sort of stuff, then I would spend a reasonable amount on defending it. Now, the second part of that question is about what's reputable or what should I use? Obviously, back to what I said, if it's free, I'm not so sure it's the best thing to be using. So I would do my research. There's a lot of good websites out there that do reviews on particular software. Don't just take the first website though that you read about some software on, okay? Cross-reference it, use a lot of information sources to determine whether that's the best application for you.
Okay, excellent. Another question from Jacob. Are wireless keyboard and mice worth using in our centres when measured on a risk to reward scale? Can they be a serious security risk?
Good question. So the answer to that really depends on where you got them from. So, and also whether they've been in your custody at all times. So for example, if you've got a wireless keyboard and mouse and you've had control of those devices and they've not been out of your sight, then they're probably okay to be used. However, you know, if you leave them lying around in a public place, which, you know, obviously I wouldn't recommend, there can always be a potential compromise issue when it comes to those devices. So for example, I had a personal experience of a recent trip to Russia. And I did take my laptop, and unfortunately, even though it was in my hotel room, someone decided to insert a device into that laptop. So again, it's back to being vigilant. It's back to the risk profile of that device in terms of whether it's been in your control. And to answer the question, you know, you really have to make a judgment call for yourself. But in general, you know, if you've bought the keyboard or the mouse from a reputable place and it's been in your possession, it should be okay.
And from a reputable manufacturer as well, that's obviously adhering to providing security capabilities inside their peripherals.
That's correct.
So Lee, maybe you've got one more question that you want to ask.
Yes, we've got a couple here. If we don't get to them all, we can always answer those later. But let's have a look which we got here. So that's a good question from Lauren. I've had a few actually. So is the incognito mode on the internet, so in a browser, safe to use, or private mode in Safari, for example? What do you think about that, Glenn?
Yeah. So incognito, very aware of incognito. Look, incognito doesn't protect you from bad actors or hackers. What it does is it actually protects you from exchanging information openly on the internet. So it also stops things from being cached. So for example, you might use a banking website where your password is remembered either accidentally or on purpose. Whereas if you were to use incognito, that password wouldn't be stored in that session. Okay, so I guess, is it safe to use? Yes, it's safe to use, but you've got to understand what the actual incognito or private mode in Safari actually is for. Okay, so it's not really there to give you extra protection against being breached. It's there to stop information from being exchanged.
It's a question from me, Glenn, actually.
Mhm.
What do you think is the most secure web browser out there at the moment?
I think it depends on how the web browser is used, actually. So it comes back to the user themselves. If you're cautious and use it in the right way, I would stick to the mainstream browsers, to be honest with you. And that really comes back to the resources that the manufacturers have to create the security profiles within the browsers. So for example, if it's a freeware browser or something that's, potentially new, but from a small company, you're probably not sure about where security fits into the application development, whereas I know, for example, that Microsoft and Google have security at the core of all their applications.
Cool. Do we have time for any more questions, Lee?
There's just one actually, one question left, so I'll that now, Glenn. So, question centers around using free Wi-Fi. Can I use free Wi-Fi, and what's the safest way to do so?
Okay, so the short answer is yes, but in a certain way. So don't use free Wi-Fi without using a VPN. Okay, and the reason for that is that the people that build the Wi-Fi networks, so for example your coffee shop or I don't know, the department store or anything like that, they don't have actually any responsibility to protect your information. Okay, so when you click onto the free Wi-Fi, maybe at the airport or whatever, what will happen is there'll be a disclaimer at the very beginning, and that disclaimer, don't know how many pages long, will have something in it about the fact that they're not responsible for the loss of your data. So the first recommendation is to use a VPN, but the second recommendation is to use a VPN which you actually pay for. Free VPNs, unfortunately, have had a bad reputation recently for your information being sold. What do I mean by that? The VPN server that you're connecting to is actually storing the information during your exchange, and then they're selling it onwards. So again, back to that whole rule about free. Is it really free? No, you're paying for it in some way.
And Glenn, I'm just going to say that if you wouldn't mind explaining what VPN stands for.
Yep. So it's a virtual private network. A lot of people will have used a VPN to watch TV in other countries. So for example, what will happen with that VPN is you can have a UK IP address, or you can have an American IP address, and you can watch American Netflix or something like that, HBO. Not that I would ever do anything like that, but that's where people will have come in contact with a VPN. So virtual private network, what that does is it creates a tunnel between your computer and the server that you're connecting to that's providing that secure connection. Okay, but as I said, don't use a free one, use one that you pay for.
Right, and that rounds out all the questions, Glenn.
Awesome.
Okay.
Awesome. All right. Well, I think if we can move to the next slide, Glenn. This is the team at Nallawilli, and I'll let you read through this before. I'll just regale you with the story that Scott alluded to at the beginning, which is our founder Roderick, who a couple of Fridays ago clicked an SMS. Obviously, he's been receiving a lot of packages by DHL because we're all stuck at home, and he's based in New South Wales. He can't go out shopping, and it was one message that came in was a genuine DHL delivery notice, and the next one came in was click on me, I've got a package for you. And it was a combination of a phishing attack, human error, and impersonation, and he just wasn't paying attention. It's exactly as Glenn mentioned. He was just distracted, wasn't paying attention, hit the link, and boom, it downloaded something on his phone. Now, he was wary enough to call me and said, what do I do? And I immediately told him, like, get onto the bank, freeze the account, and change the password from a different account, and then wipe the phone. So he was aware enough to know what he'd done, and he hadn't at least left it a long time. So Glenn's managed to scare the pants off us for most of the time he's been with us. But it's really, if you're aware and you're cognizant of what you're doing and you take the time, you really shouldn't be too scared. You should be confident in your actions. And I think that's a good way to finish it out. Feel free to contact me, Glenn, Scott, or Ron. I didn't see any questions for Ron about him being a First Nation trainee inside Nallawilli. That's fine. But I thank everybody for turning up to the call, and hopefully you got something out of it. We will send the recording out, and we'll try and transcript all the questions as well so they can go with the recording. And that's it, folks. Stay safe, everybody, and have a good day and enjoy your weekend when it comes around. Ta-da.